Grant Holmes is fully healthy, and he suffered a different injury than what we thought last year. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, your daily source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can also find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network, presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to fanduel.com to get started. I want to talk about everything that went on in Northport yesterday, whether it was players reporting, all that good stuff. We're going to talk about Spencer Schwellenbach needing surgery and Chris Bassitt signing with the Orioles. But before we do that, I want to talk about Grant Holmes. Because last year was his first year back in a rotation full-time since before the lost 2020 minor league season. And he was pitching well before he went down with a partial UCL tear in his elbow. Missed the rest of the season and was attempting non-surgical rehab. So rather than going in and having surgery on it, they were doing strengthening exercises, all kind of different things to let it heal naturally. And because of the nature of what they were doing, I was very, very hesitant to count on Grant Holmes this year. I just did not necessarily think that it was a smart move to assume he would be available, period. Never mind throw meaningful innings for you. Like, he threw 115 and out of the rotation last year. He threw 68 and a third in 2024, and I didn't even know if we would get that. And then we got the offseason medical reports, right? Alex Anthopoulos said that Grant Holmes was throwing the ball better than he ever had and was feeling better than he ever had and all of that stuff. And Grant finally talked to the media yesterday in Northport. And it turns out the main issue last year was not the UCL tear. He had a flexor strain, which is in your forearm that leads up to your elbow. And he thinks he's had that UCL tear for a while, and the thing that stopped him from pitching was the flexor strain. Here's the quote from Grant Holmes in Northport on Wednesday. Quote, "That was the first image I've ever had on my elbow. So nobody knows if that UCL tear was there beforehand, and it was really just a flexor strain. Honestly, I think that's what it was, because if I had a tear in the flexor tendon and the UCL, that would have been a whole lot different. I wouldn't have recovered as fast." I've noticed a trend, and this is not a thing that Atlanta exclusively does. I've noticed a trend. I think it must be part of the CBA or the rules between the Players Association and the teams. A lot of these players, their physicals don't include a vision test. Eddie Rosario, Sean Murphy, they don't include a vision test. They don't include MRIs or CT scans or any of that stuff on the important things that you need to know about for these guys. Grant Holmes thinks he may have had a UCL tear for a while. Ronaldo Lopez having shoulder issues for multiple years. Sean Murphy dealing with a hip injury for multiple years. And I'm not saying it's unrealistic to think you can just go give a full body CT scan and MRI to every single free agent you sign and every player every season. But I'm noticing, not just in Atlanta, a lot of teams, a lot of places, you're seeing this situation where guys have issues that the teams don't find out about unless either the player volunteers it or it impacts their performance so much that it's obvious. The Sean Murphy hip thing, from what I understand, that came up because his mechanics changed so much that the team came to him and said, "Hey, are you having hip problems? Because we can see your swing is different. And he said, yes, I am. And I have for a couple of years, and they made him go get it fixed. I don't really know what's going on there, right? Like, this isn't an Atlanta thing. This is a Major League Baseball thing. So it's got to be something either the entire league has not had the idea to do, like, hey, for our pitchers, when we do their physical to open spring training, let's give them a vision test. Let's give them an elbow MRI just so we have a baseline of where they are. Like, I don't want to believe that nobody in baseball's thought of that. There has to be something between the Players Association and the league where the teams can't do imaging unless there's a specific issue they're trying to diagnose. I don't know. If you're in baseball and let me know. My DMs are open. Give me a heads up like, hey, yeah, we have this issue. We have this restriction or whatever. But since Grant Holmes he said, quote, I feel strong and healthy right now. My recovery has been really good. He has 100% go, no restrictions. And it feels like he's going to end up being in the rotation because of the Schwellenbach thing. And we're going to get to Spencer Schwellenbach and Chris Bassitt in the second segment. So hey, stay tuned for that. Don't worry, we are going to cover that. I do have thoughts here. But if Grant Holmes is going to stick in the rotation, we've got to figure out something about his fastball. Right? I wrote in detail about this over on the newsletter this morning, bravestoday.com. But his four-seam fastball is one of the worst four-seam fastballs in all of baseball. And it really is, it doesn't matter how you measure it, right? If you look at total run value on four-seam fastballs, it's an accumulation stat. The more you throw, the more you can go up or down in run value. It is the 8th worst individual pitch among any starter that qualified for the StatCast leaderboards last year. Minus 14 run value. If you look at it by the rate, right? Run value per 100 pitches to kind of normalize off of guys who threw more or less innings or whatever, it goes from 8th worst to 7th worst at minus 2.2 per 100 pitches. And I don't necessarily think that the offensive stats you give up off of an individual pitch tells the entire story, right? You've got stuff in there, like Arsenal interactions, who's behind them, who's on, all that good stuff. But Grant Holmes' fastball gave up a 330 batting average and a 651 slug last year. And there wasn't a ton of variance on this. The expected batting average was a 300. The expected slug was a 604. He gave up 10 home runs on the pitch, a 48.3% hard hit rate on the fastball. It's not a very good fastball. The stuff plus on it last year came out to an 84. And when you look at what's wrong with the four-seam fastball, the velocity, he averaged 94.5 last year. The MLB average for righties is a 95. But the movement profile, it is very much a dead zone fastball. For those of you who don't remember what this is, there's this proven theory now at this point that based on a pitcher's arm angle and their release point, you can estimate where the pitch is going to go on a fastball. And it's something that a lot of hitters are doing using just just subconsciously. They've seen so many four-seam fastballs that based on where it comes out, they can kind of assume where it's going to end up in the strike zone as far as the path of the ball. And your induced vertical break, which is how much it appears to resist gravity from backspin, and your horizontal movement are what takes it out of the dead zone. And I have the graphics. I ran the model. I have the graphics in the newsletter. But Grant Holmes' fastball is almost exactly where hitters think it's going to go. He has 2.5 inches less horizontal movement than the average righty fastball. He's at 5.2. The average is like 7.7, right? He has like around 15 inches of induced vertical break. The league average is a little over 16. So like it gets crushed because hitters think they know where it's going to go and they just easily hit it. So we've got to improve that. There's a couple ways you can do this. Some of them are just mechanical tweaks, right? I'm pretty confident the Braves have probably tried all of this stuff, right? You can change the arm slot a little bit to prioritize. Like if you want more induced vertical break, you raise the slot. If you want more horizontal movement, you lower the slot. Think how Chris Sale's fastball comes out sidearm and it moves sideways, really. You can change the finger pressure or the positioning of your fingers to change the spin axis, all that kind of stuff. I'm assuming they've tried a lot of that stuff. If I know to try it, I'm sure they have. So the other thing now is he needs to diversify what he throws. We saw Hurston Waldrop do this. He had the same issue. And when Sean Murphy was rehabbing in Gwinnett last year to start the season, he told Hurston Waldrop, hey, you should add a sinker. And so when Hurston Waldrop came up, he added a cutter, which you guys know, that's my thing. He added a sinker. And in 56 and a third innings last year, 886 pitches Hurston Waldrop threw in the majors. He threw 22 four-seam fastballs because his fastball was even more of a dead zone fastball than Grant Holmes. So it feels like Holmes needs to do this. He has a cutter. Slider, cutter, curveball might need to be his primary sequence instead of slider, four-seam, curveball. But like there's things you have to do here. Like you have to buy into the idea of fastball diversity. It's a Jeremy Hefner thing. He likes that. Atlanta's been teaching that to their kids already. J.R. Ritchie throws all three fastballs. Waldrop throws all three fastballs. Schwellenbach very quickly added a sinker when he got to the majors to throw all three fastballs. It's a thing I think Holmes needs to do. The reason we need Holmes to do it, though, is because Atlanta has not added to the rotation. Chris Bassitt went off the board last night. And a lot of people have thoughts on it. Let's talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Grand Slam Getaways. If you've dreamt of the ultimate baseball road trip, this is for you. Grand Slam Getaways offers bucket list baseball bus trips designed for fans who love the game and want to travel in style. All these trips depart from Atlanta, include at least 2 Braves road games. There's field-level tickets, 3-star hotels, daily breakfast, a full slate of ballparks, appearances by former MLB players, giveaways, fun side trips. Louisville Slugger Museum is one of them. The Bull Durham filming location is one of them. It's a great way if you're retired, you're just a baseball fan, you want a summer vacation, or a parent-child bonding thing. Great stress-free way to hit the road with fellow fans. They're going to Florida in May, they're going to the Midwest in June, and the Northeast in July. You can reserve your spot now with a small deposit. Go to grandslam-getaways.com to make this summer a Grand Slam. Again, grandslam-getaways.com to let the baseball adventure begin. Okay, Chris Bassitt came off the board last night. $18.5 million on a one-year deal to the Baltimore Orioles. And I have some thoughts. Thought number one, which I tried to express on social media last night, and it was not well received because catastrophizing was going on from Braves fans. The Braves were not going to sign Chris Bassitt in February for $18.5 million. I wrote about this on, I think, Tuesday. Atlanta's CBT payroll on Tuesday was at $260.1 million. The third CBT tier is $284. So $23 million in change in spending room. Max. AA has said they do not want to go over that third tier because your draft pick gets moved back and it's more than just money at that point. Before you get there, it's just money, and that's just a line item they stick into their payroll calculations and they move on. And so let's assume that they had matched the offer for Chris Bassitt, right? $18.5 million. They go from 260 to roughly 279, 278 and change. And you're looking at $4 or $5 million left for the trade deadline. We've talked about this before. Atlanta likes to keep $10 to $15 million in reserve for in-season ads. Not just the trade deadline, but in-season ads. They've made trades earlier than July or August before. So I personally never thought they would sign Chris Bassitt. And when the clamor was really loud for the Braves to sign Chris Bassitt, that's when I did the show where I said, hey, if you're getting Chris Bassitt just to give you innings and just to give you a baseline of production, the Zips projections from this year for Chris Bassitt and Bryce Elder are remarkably similar. So if you don't have any injuries and you just want an arm for the rotation, it's entirely possible Bryce Elder can give you 85-90% of what Chris Bassitt is projected to do for 20 times less. I still think that. I still think that Atlanta was never going to sign Chris Bassitt in February. It just wasn't going to happen. I'm personally of the opinion that their money that they spent late in December and January, bring back Ha-Seong Kim, go getting Tyler Kenley, some of that was the money they had put aside to add a starting pitcher. That's personally what I think happened. At the same time, it is important to recognize that it was likely a mistake to not add a starter at some point in time this winter. I think it's very clear to say you needed to add a starter. Given the fact that you had all of these health questions with everybody in the rotation, and the real issue is not Atlanta not being willing to break the third tier of the CBT in February for Chris Bassitt. The real issue here is the Braves simultaneously having, one, the desire for an impact starter and setting a very high threshold to bring in that guy. So a very high threshold of what that guy had to be in order for him to join the team, while also maintaining the Atlanta max of $22 million. As salaries have increased, as salaries have grown over every year since the 2020 season, we've seen pitching cost more and more and more. The cost of one WAR in free agency is like $11 million now. If you are maintaining this $22 million limit, and I know they have offered more than $22 million before to certain players. Freddie Freeman was offered more than $22 million. Aaron Nola was offered more than $22 million. The real mistake of this offseason is not getting in right at the third tier of the CBT to sign Chris Bassitt in February. It's trying to maintain that $22 million limit and therefore cutting your options to virtually nothing. That's the real problem here. Do I think that Chris Bassitt would have been a useful ad? Yeah, sure. You probably needed to do that in November or December. You probably didn't need to wait till February. And to me, it's very clear, again, I know I'm repeating myself here. It's very clear that they, at a certain point of the offseason, they decided, hey, we're not going to get this deal done. We're not going to sign a free agent starter. They brought in Ha-Seong Kim on December 15th. They signed a couple other guys, Ian Hamilton on December 19th. Tyler Kenley on January 10th. That, 25, 26, whatever million dollars there? That was the money that would have gone to a starter. And we haven't so far heard about them being in on any of the free agent starters. Nothing credible because they don't leak. And everybody was asking the Braves to in response to the Spencer Schwellenbach injury, to sign somebody. They already did that. Spencer gave us a timeline when he was talking to the media yesterday. And he said it was 2 Fridays ago when he first felt the pain. That's January 30th. Martin Perez's deal was signed on February 4th. Martin Perez was the response to losing Spencer Schwellenbach. Just because we found out about it this week doesn't mean they didn't know. It really, really, and if you have in-depth personal knowledge of this situation and I'm wrong, my DMs are open, let me know. But it really feels like the response from Atlanta was Martin Perez. Again, the timing is too coincidental. Schwellenbach reports pain on the 30th of January. They start doing testing and doctor consults and all that stuff. And 4 days later, the Braves sign a lefty with very similar projections this year, FIP and ERA and all that stuff, to Bassitt and Giolito and Elder and Martin Perez. And they sign him on February 4th. That was the response. And it probably was a mistake. And here's the thing. We don't know if it was the right move or not. We're not going to know the outcome of this whole situation. At the time, you can see their argument for signing Martin Perez. Again, all of the estimators, the public-facing projections, has all of those guys roughly in the same area of production. Bassitt, Giolito, Perez, Elder, all those guys are roughly in the same place. Bassitt has been the best of those four in recent seasons. Bassitt has been the most available from a health perspective. But you can see where they said, hey, and they must have known how much Chris Bassitt would cost. Clearly they knew. And they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and make this other move instead. And again, I can see why they did that. I don't like it. He probably should have added a starter back in November or December. Honestly, I would have considered, I would have gone after Dylan Cease. I don't know if I would have been comfortable paying $30 million a year for Dylan Cease, but I would have been in on Dylan Cease. So let's see what happens. We can acknowledge this sucks. Losing Spencer Schwellenbach, he said yesterday he's going to have surgery. It's going to be like an elbow scope, arthroscopic. Best case scenario, he's back probably second half of the year. He didn't give a timeline. This is my timeline. Best case scenario, second half of the year. Worst case scenario, he's not back till sometime next season because they get in there and find out, no, the UCL actually is compromised. And we have to do an internal brace or a Tommy John or something like that. We don't know. But the Braves were clearly comfortable moving on without adding Chris Bassitt. And what I'm curious about is, were they comfortable moving on without Bassitt because they like everybody else in the room, or because they couldn't afford to sign Chris Bassitt because they had moved on in December? They had moved on from the free agent starters in December and spent that money elsewhere. We don't know. In just a second, let's talk about some of the other news from Northport. Dylan Lee's arbitration case. Guys, new positions, new numbers, who's in camp, all that good stuff. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. I know I mentioned this yesterday, but a lot of the FanDuel numbers keep changing for the Braves in the wake of the Schwellenbach injury. The win total, the over-under's now 88.5, which is still a really good win total. Let's be completely honest. That is still a really good win total. The problem is they have the Mets at 90.5. They have the Phillies at 89.5. But the Braves are now third in win total in the division. When you look at the winners of the National League, they are tied for fourth with the Cubs at plus 950. It's Dodgers, Mets, Phillies, and then Cubs and Braves. So they've fallen back in all the odds from losing Schwellenbach. And I get it. And a lot of that, like Fangraphs, they updated their projections for Schwellenbach coming back in midseason. A lot of that's assuming he makes it back in mid-year. He might not make it back this year. We don't know. We don't know when the surgery is. We don't know what they're going to find when they're in there. We don't know how long the recovery will be. He might not be back this year. He might be back after the All-Star break. He might be back before that. Who knows? But other news from from Brave Spring Training. Let's call this the Northport Report. I wrote that last night, put that out last night over on Braves Today. I'm going to try to start doing that on the newsletter every night. It's just, here's all the news and notes from the day in Northport. We talked about Holmes. We talked about Schwellenbach surgery. Dylan Lee won his arbitration case the other day. So, a reminder here, he was asking for $2.2 million. The Braves filed at $2 million. And everybody was a little mad that they went to arbitration over a $200,000 difference. I think it's important to point out, in arbitration, the numbers the team and the player file at are closer together than where they were negotiating. Because the nature of arbitration, you give a number, the team gives a number, and the arbitrators pick one or the other. There's no compromising. There's no meeting in the middle. And so just because the difference was $200,000 when they got to arbitration or when they filed for arbitration doesn't mean that was the difference in negotiations. Dylan Lee could have been asking for 3. The Braves could have been offering 1.5. You are incentivized to come closer to the midpoint when you file. Because again, they're picking one or the other. And when you look at, like, the players are 9-3 in arbitration this year. And when you look at the ones that the players have lost, some of them, like Eric Lauer in Toronto, the difference was $1.35 million. It was a big, it's like they filed at 4.4. He asked for 5.75. The difference was significant. The ones that the players won, like Tarek Skubal, they filed at 19. He asked for 32 as a 2-time Cy Young winner and compared salary-wise to other guys who have won 2 Cy Youngs. They filed way too low, right? And so it's important to know the difference was probably more than $200,000. They didn't take him to arbitration over $200,000. They took him to arbitration over maybe $500,000 or $1 million or whatever. And you could argue they still should have paid that, and that's fine. I'm not debating that. I'm just saying they didn't take him to arbitration over $200,000. Let's just make sure we understand that's how it works. Robert Suarez, our free agent setup man, going to be future closer, was out of camp on Tuesday because of a visa issue. He reported to camp on Wednesday. So he is in, he is there. No concerns with that. There are quite a few position players already in camp. Ozzie Albies reported he was in, I think, on Tuesday. Olsen, Riley, Acuna, Harris were all there taking BP on Wednesday. Mike Yastrzemski, Mauricio Dubon, Brett Wisely, Luke Williams are all already in camp. Position players don't have to show up until Saturday. Sunday is the first full squad workout, so a lot of the guys will get there on Saturday. They may not show up until Sunday, but they have to be there for the workout on Sunday. I'm really curious to see when Jurickson Profar gets there. I haven't seen that he's there yet. Being that he's playing in the WBC for Team Netherlands, he's going to have to leave camp to go report to the WBC along with Ozzy, along with Chadwick Tromp. Both those guys clearly are already in camp. And so I'm curious to see when Profar reports. Again, he doesn't have to report until, as long as he's there for Sunday's first full squad workout, he's fine. But it feels like he's probably he needs to be there sooner rather than later. Again, the rest of the outfield's already there. Yastrzemski's there. Harris is there. Acuna's there. We got more information on Nacho Alvarez and the whole catching thing. Shout out to Chad Bishop of the AJC. Bishop said that Nacho's not converting to catcher. This is just something to give him a little more versatility. The quote was an extra tool in the toolbox. Apparently, somebody approached him about maybe doing this prior to the Arizona Fall League, and he's been getting this suggestion since he was in high school. If you look at his body type, I said this yesterday, you look at his body type, it looks like he would be a good catcher, right? So some of the other things that I'm looking for from camp, I'm waiting to see some video and stuff of this today, is now that Grant Holmes just might be in the rotation on opening day, opens a bullpen spot. I'm really curious to see. Jose Suarez is a guy that, we all assume can be back there because he can make spot starts and stuff. But James Karinchak and Ian Hamilton are both non-roster invitees to spring training, and I'm curious to see what they can do. I'm curious to see what they look like. Because if you get either one of those guys back, like the best case scenario, I think, for this season and health and all of this stuff is if Schwellenbach is able to come back sometime in the second half and the rest of the guys stay healthy. Let's say Bryce Elder improves. He adds that cutter I've been asking him to do, throws the curveball more, becomes a more consistent performer. You could have a scenario where Schwellenbach comes back, Elder solidified. You can call up Hurst and Waldrop. You could throw Ronaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes both back in the bullpen in the second half, along with a Joey Wentz as your long man. You have Karinchak or Hamilton Karinchak throwing high 90s, along with Iglesias and Suarez. Joel Payamps hits back to his form, and you could have an incredibly formidable bullpen. But I do think the injury to Schwellenbach does create an opening for one of those NRI relievers to get a roster spot. You still have the ability to make some 40-man moves. AJ Smith-Shawver is going to go to the 60-day IL at some point in time. So that's one 40-man spot you can buy right there. And when you consider the fact that Brett Wisely is already on the 40-man roster, if he ends up being your final bench spot, the one 40-man spot that you can still easily make could go to one of those relievers. Could go to Karinchak. I actually think Ian Hamilton's on the 40-man roster. So, lots of options here. Really curious to see. Those are the guys I want to see the most. And then Spencer Strider. I think I talked about this the other day. I want to see if he's added some sort of other fastball. A two-seamer, a sinker, something like that. Has he tweaked his changeup to be more like a splitter or a split change? I think that'd be interesting development. That's what I'm looking for on Thursday. This has been Braves Today for Thursday, February 12th. Do me a favor. Please like the video. Please subscribe, both here and at bravestoday.com. Again, we're doing the Northport report every night. It's coming out with all the news and notes from that day in spring training. We'll do that all the way through the games being played. And then the paywall on a lot of the deep dive stuff is being turned on in just a couple weeks. So if you're not subscribed, now's the chance to get in so that you have full access to everything that we write. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.